Hello and welcome to another edition of Planet Outlook. For any nature enthusiast, wildlife films are a quintessential part of life. Visual storytelling is an important part for raising awareness on wildlife conservation. There are countless wildlife documentaries which have played a very critical role in either transporting us to wild places from our living rooms or addressing critical issues on biodiversity. On the eve of India's annual Wildlife Week, my guest today is the award-winning filmmaker and educator Rita Banerjee. Welcome, Rita, to the Planet Outlook show. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Rita, let's begin with your journey as a filmmaker. How all it started, if you can just go back in time and tell us a bit.
Yeah. Ananda, actually, it's been pretty organic in the sense that, till I was in college, what I knew was that, I loved the outdoors and loved animals, but I didn't know whether it could be a career as such. And then I think my father handed me this beautiful, one of those old Agfa cameras, with those three aperture settings and a fixed lens and all that. And that kind of hooked me on to photography. Black and white. That time it was just black and white and hugely expensive. But I think that was the hook, you can say. And once I started taking pictures, at least I knew that was something I really loved doing. And then I got a chance to work in Riverbanks studios straight after college, with Mike. And that's step by step. It started with the camera, and Riverbanks was doing environment films, and one started traveling across India. And, over time, it just kind of grew and grew, and one knew this is what one loved doing. You kind of saw what is the wildlife around India and so many other things which are so beautiful about India. So I think that was the hook, you can say, and that's how my journey began. Yeah.
So, I must say you were quite lucky to begin your career with Mike. And how was it to work with such a legend?
I think it was fantastic. It was a fantastic. I was there for a long time, 10 years, so pretty much part of the core team. And I think the nice part was that that time the equipment was all, the big high band editing structure, editings, the tapes were really big and cameras used to be bigger. So you never went alone for a shoot. You had to have a 3-person unit at least, with those huge tripods. You had a recorder and a camera where the cable had to be connected to the recorder. So one person to carry the recorder, one for the camera. And we spent a lot of time in the field. So, and most of the travel was by road because, that was the most feasible way to go. So it was a fantastic learning. And I think what was nice about Riverbanks was that Mike let us use the equipment very freely. And I loved machines. So, the fact that I could play around with the editing, play around with the camera. So it was a very holistic learning overall, both the field and the studio. That way.
But a lot has changed since those times in ways of technology. So, and you have seen the filmmaking industry very closely, especially the environmental sector. So, you may got lucky with a break in Riverbanks, but how difficult was it to be a filmmaker? Or still it is now as a career kind of thing? Because I keep hearing issues of funding, equipment. Equipment has become a much easier. People are making films on their phones also today. But in terms of budgets, when we kind of compare with the Western budgets of wildlife filmmaking, So we remain quite a long way behind, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's both good and bad. Like funding has always been an issue. Even when we were working in the studio, it wasn't easy in terms of wildlife films or doing the films we really wanted to do. It was a constant struggle to raise funds for that. And it's ultimately, whether you talk about the past or about now, it's ultimately that the drive or the passion which really takes you forward. The things which have changed definitely from that time to now is that the technology has become much more affordable. The quality has really gone up. So earlier, where you were limited by, if you did not have the resources or the equipment, it was very tough to get funding for your film. Now, even with a DSLR, a good DSLR, FCP and all made it much more affordable for filmmakers. Many more independent filmmakers are coming up. So even if somebody is not supporting you, that one film as a pilot you can make on your own, or one film in your backyard you can make on your own. So that has definitely changed. While earlier it was very difficult to do that. Like minimum camera hire, that time I'm saying used to be 5,000 a day during that time. So you can imagine the cost of making a film or any documentary, that way.
So, was the transition from Riverbanks to your own production house, which is the Dusty Foot, was it kind of smooth, or you had barriers to overcome?
I think if I look at it, it's been when you really love doing something, nothing really seems like a challenge or a hurdle. It was definitely like starting from scratch again. Because when I started Dusty Foot, it was like I'd left a big place and I was starting my own production house. So it was actually starting from scratch. And but the advantage was I used to do a lot of camera work, freelance camera work also. And that kept me going because when I left, one needed the money, you needed to get your own equipment. And because one was a technical person, one could do camera work. That's how one was able to sustain and put that money in the films we wanted to do. So it was two of us who started Dusty Foot, Shilpi and I. So we kind of, both of us kind of kept taking freelance work. And we knew that there was one film which we wanted to do on our own, where we could put in our, and that, I think that's a great thing to do because that keeps you going. And then nothing. So it's like I did camera work for all kinds of things, from MTV to VTV to, wildlife films to everything. But that all the savings, all the money went into the film which we wanted to do. So it was very interesting. It was a learning. It was tough at times, ups and downs. But I think always that the fact that we were doing our own thing and we were doing what we really loved, I think that just takes you along.
So, if I now come to the role of wildlife films in conservation, you were part of some amazing documentaries, path-breaking in those times in the 90s, the films which have won the Panda Award, popular as the Green Oscar. Your own film also with the Dusty Foot Productions has won a Panda Award. So if you can just narrate those experiences, the films which had impacted both you and as well as the country.
Yeah. I think actually I really believe that video and filmmaking is a very strong tool for wildlife conservation. At least it's a catalyst. One from the point of view of the fact that when you're in the field, there's no better learning than to understand what it really means to do wildlife conservation. You really look at the amount of people working in different circumstances, adapting to those locations, whether it's turtles, whether it's tigers, also the kind of collaborations between different people. So your understanding kind of opens up because you're making a film, but you're being able to observe a lot. And fortunately, like when I was in Riverbanks, we worked on this film on the whale sharks. And in fact, we spent almost 4 years making that because it was, we went onto the shore, we were filming something else, and we saw the killing of the whale sharks on the beach. And actually, we just saw one whale shark, and it was kind of, I think, shook all of us up. And we knew that we wanted to make a film to protect this beautiful animal, you know. And but in India, you're always struggling with the livelihoods of fishermen. You know, you're struggling with wildlife conservation, and there's this always struggle that your actions have to be really, you have to be really sure of the facts, and make sure that it doesn't impact either party in a very drastic way. So it took us time, and when the film actually came out, people were pretty shocked by what was happening. And I think the power of the film was that it actually led to the change in whale shark was put in the Wildlife Protection Act, and it led to a different groups joining and making it one of the most beautiful campaigns. Also, if you see later on, Ramki, Bano, Sashank, they were just that little clip they made of the Amur falcons, the Amur falcons being slaughtered. It was a short clip, but it made all the difference. So video clips and films are very powerful, because they are able to bring to everybody's room, or the people who are making the rules, the laws, the policies, they bring it to that room. They bring people into that room of see what's happening. So they have a lot of power. But at the same time, I think there's some films like the Wild Meat Trail, which I made. It wasn't something which would have changed something. It was a good film. It brought in the issue out in the front, but in that, it was not the film alone which could have even done anything. You had to work with the community,
Even before the whale shark, you were part of the film on elephant capture, which also
Yes.
got international recognition. And
yeah, that was the first film. That was in 94.
Yeah.
That was called The Last Migration. And that was the first film from India, I think, to have won the Panda Award at widescreen. And that was about a capture of a whole herd of elephants, 18 elephants in Sarguja. That time Sarguja was part of Madhya Pradesh. It was a fantastic experience, because this whole set of team, Kunki elephants and the vets and the entire team came from Karnataka. And over 45 days, they spent tracking the herd, capturing the elephants. And then I think one whole year was spent in training them for forest service. So the film documented that day to day. Yeah, kind of.
But that also brought in some legislation.
I'm not very sure about that. Not that film, I think. Not that film.
You talked about the Amur falcon a bit. So tell us about the experience of filming that entire kind of journey of the falcon migrating across the northeast sky. Yeah.
No, that was one of the most, what can I say, almost like a meditative experience, because we were fortunate to go 1 year, the first year when the ban happened. Just the year before, Ramki, Banu and Sashank, they'd filmed the killing of the Amur falcons. And next year when we joined them, it was when the ban had happened. And we would be in the field early morning, because that's when you see the maximum movement of the Amur falcons. It was that we would leave the camp at 4 o'clock in the morning, sometimes earlier, and then you just wait at one spot and wait for the Amur falcons to kind of take off. Shilpi and I were filming. She would take one camera and go somewhere else. I was somewhere else, and I still remember one of the spots. It was up on a hill, and there was nobody around. There were all these Amur falcons on the, sitting on these wires. And I think just 4-5 hours of just sitting there, filming it, and it just takes you somewhere else here. I mean, and you're so thankful that something like that has been protected. And I think it's these moments which you want to share with the world, or tell everybody that, this is what it is. I mean, it's, when you talk about wildlife, you talk about conservation, it's these moments which you work for, or and that's why films are such an, it's very, once you get into, I think, wildlife films, it's very difficult to extract yourself from that.
Yeah. So what are the other great moments which are still very vivid in your memory last 30 years that you have been traveling in India's wild places?
There's so many. I mean, there's so many. It's like, it's, well, how can I describe it? We filmed turtles for a very long time. Been filming turtles since 2006. We started in Orissa, with the olive ridley turtles. And then we followed it up with filming the leatherbacks in Andamans. And those experiences are just amazing because you're at night, actually you can't see anything. You're just waiting for it's again, the turtles come up to the beach at night. And with the olive ridleys, you have like hundreds of them coming up. But at night, you really can't see them because it's pitch dark, and you can't use regular lights. You have to use infrared lights because you can't disturb the turtles. So suddenly you see you're surrounded by these turtles at night, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and after filming, you just sit there and you say, wow, like it's almost like a blessing that you got a chance to experience that moment. So it was the same with the olive ridleys. The leatherback was something else altogether, like, seeing a creature which is almost like a living fossil. Like, it's like, you see it and you're like, wow, you're just sitting there and watching this beautiful, beautiful turtle on the beach and nobody's around there. Like, just the Karen community, the guys who were monitoring the leatherback turtles. So yes, many moments, driving around India, it's one of the best ways to, I think, learn about India, or learn about what's happening in India.
So,
And I guess there are many moments with people also. It's not always been very good. There are also very tough things you see. I've seen, like, women walking miles to get firewood, children scraping the vessels for the midday meal. So it's always like both sides to the story. Yeah.
but since you have filmed so much of marine life, both the whale, shark, and turtles, do you feel that somewhere we have lacked in marine conservation?
Actually, what I've seen, all these films done in collaboration with people who are working on marine conservation. So you have Dakshin Foundation now, Dr. Karthik Shankar, he's been working on turtles he's one of the top biologists. And then you have an organization called ICSF, International Collective in Support of Fish Workers. They've been working with traditional fishers. And in fact, if you look at the fisheries movement in India, it's been one of the most, if you look at it, it's like one of the most amazing community movements, and of how the fish is marketed. I think what the issues around marine conservation, based on what we have seen, are very similar to terrestrial things. You have the traditional fish workers, you have the marine ecology, but again, the conflict comes not with that. The conflict comes with the kind of development projects which are proposed. A simple example being, for example, ports. Everybody wants a port. While so many ports are not required. And Pondican did this fantastic study where almost 25% of our beaches have disappeared. And that disappearance, a little bit is blamed on climate change and the sea level rise, where villages have moved, almost 3 times over 20 years. But the key issue is, when you build a structure into the sea, you're stopping the sand from depositing on the beach. It's a natural cycle. The beach takes the sand away and deposits again. And that's how the beaches are formed, reformed, shapes are changed. But because of the structure, because of the artificial structures along the coast, it has taken so many beaches away. So a lot of it is, I think people are working on it. Issues are very similar. And like the terrestrial things, a lot needs to be done.
So before I move on to your new work, how was it to win the coveted Panda Award, the Green Oscars? So tell us about a bit more. You have been part twice with Riverbanks, winning that award, and then on your own kind of thing for the Wild Meat Trail.
Yeah, difficult to go back to it, but yes, I remember when the first one, the last migration, when we were working on it. At that time, Mike, Shibani, and I were working on that film, and we spent I think 2 months. We were just sitting on the edit table, and then suddenly we got this. That time you had, I can't remember. We got the email. I think we got an email from Wildscreen saying that your film's been nominated, and we just couldn't believe it. That first moment I think is the most exciting moment. And it was just amazing. Like, we couldn't believe that we had been nominated, and then the whole thing of going there was a different experience. Um, and same thing with Shows of Silence. I think Shows of Silence, the reason it was more important was because it was about a species, and I think somewhere we were making the film to protect the whale shark. And so I think something like a Panda Award really helps in, you know, picking up the issue. And I think that was the main thing. And yeah, as when you start on your own, you're always, I think, it's a different thing altogether, because you're now on your own, you've set up your new thing, you're again making films, and to win it under your own banner, it's obviously a very special feeling. And The Wild Meat Trail, again, was a film which we had spent almost 5 years filming, editing, shooting. We knew it was an important film, but to get the Panda nomination first was a very, very big moment for us. A very, very big moment for us. And then obviously the whole going to Wildscreen, and you have the other, I remember Akanksha was there, and Alka was there, and the rest of the Indian contingent. And it's always very nice to meet at those festivals. So yeah, it's a very special moment, and it's a very special thing to win the awards, and it really helps you. I think more than anything, later on, it helps you to take those issues forward. I think I would say that.
So now, for the past 5 years, you have moved away from active filmmaking
Yeah.
to become an educator. And you have been picking up talent from remote areas and been polishing them into professional filmmakers. And you established Green Hub, which is in Tejpur, Assam. So tell us this: what made you do this?
Yeah. So, Ananda, I was telling you, like, the journey has been very organic, but videos played a very important role in my life in terms of my learnings. My entire learning about wildlife conservation, about wildlife, or you can say even about India, has been through films. So, but at the same time, like we discussed earlier, when we started, there's no set platform for young people to get into wildlife filmmaking. So this thought used to always go on in my head, that how do you create a platform where anybody who's passionate about wildlife films can actually learn and move from there. And the other aspect was that I felt video documentation itself is a very, very, not just a film. You make a film, you shoot for a 25-minute film, but you have so much of footage. And that footage becomes, there's possibility of converting that as really good educational material for so many institutes, NGOs, everything. So this was the initial thought. And this was almost like 15 years back. Like, for a long time, this thought was there. And gradually you start building on that, and then there's an opportunity to start it. By the time I used to talk to a lot of people about it. And finally, in 2014, I got an opportunity to kind of pitch for it. By then, I had already worked with Northeast Network on Under the Canopy and some of the education programs which came out of the film, The Wild Meat Trail. So we had already seen some kind of impact with the education modules. So now the idea was, how do you really scale it up? From eco clubs and working with children to how do you really involve the youth at a larger scale? So that's how the Green Hub got established. And the model changed over time because I really felt it was for youth from rural areas, remote areas who still were living with the forest and rivers, and also who cannot afford this kind of technology. Because now anybody who has the resources can actually buy the camera, look at YouTube. You can do a lot of things on your own. So it was really meant for youth who do not have those resources. So that's how the whole thing started.
You mentioned Northeast Network.
Yeah.
So tell us about a bit of the Northeast Network and the collective and the work that they do in the Northeast.
Yes. So actually, it's my Green Hub in the Northeast is in collaboration with this NGO Northeast Network. It was founded by Dr. Manisha Behel, who's more popularly known as Ben, and she's also a very close friend. And actually, our first collaboration was after the Wild Meat Trail, when we developed training the trainers program on wildlife education called Under the Canopy. And I wanted to do it in collaboration with organizations who are already working here, so that it had some kind of a life, and not just a workshop. And I spoke to Ben, and she was like, why don't we start in Nagaland, in Chizami? And so we did it there. We did our first workshop. This was in 2009 or 2010, I think, the first Under the Canopy workshop with the community teachers and from different villages. And we also did it in Assam with another group. Now, what happened after the workshop was we also showed the film. There were very interesting discussions among the participants about hunting, because hunting was very common there. There were people from Konoma who had also banned hunting. So there was, a lot of interesting discussions. And I think for the first time, there was a look into wildlife as something which is also part of the ecology and not just for hunting, So I think after that, what happened was Ben kind of said, why don't we think of it as a more long-term thing? And we kind of collaborated again on the Eco Club model. And this was working with children in the village. So we worked with NEN in Chizami in Nagaland. And the team there itself they're from the village, they're farmers, Seno, Akole, they head the Nagaland team there. And they kind of really made the program very strong, because they chose children from the surrounding villages. 20 children were chosen, 10 girls, 10 boys. And we used to go as a resource person team, me, Payal, there's a friend of mine, Maya, and Sanjay Sondi from Titli Trust. We used to go there every 3 months and take sessions with the children, as well as 2 trainers, Alo and Peter. And Alo and Peter would take the sessions every Saturday with the children. So that's how the collaboration started. And we ran the Eco Club for, I think, 3 years with 2 batches. The same Eco Club went into the Amur Falcon program with Bano and Ramki, and also went into some other villages. That's how the Northeast Network collaboration began. And when I wanted to start Green Hub, I spoke to Ben and I said, would you be interested in an idea like that? And I think both our visions really matched, because Northeast Network is one of the strongest organizations working in the Northeast on women's issues, on gender justice, on natural resource management. And here we wanted to work with youth. And in the Northeast, working with youth also means taking them away from insurgency, taking them away from violence, And I think it just clicked. And we got together to kind of start Green Hub. Yeah.
So you have also a very interesting process of selecting students for this program. People who have never seen a movie camera in their life or an editing machine. How do you go about this amazing process?
Yeah, it's a quite an intense thing. Our application process itself is about 4 months. Like, we open up the applications in December. And there is a lot of work by the team at Green Hub, to kind of reach out to as many people in remote areas. So, it's like through NGOs, through phone calls, through forest departments, through Facebook. We use all mediums, regional newspapers. And it's not one phone call to one person. We kind of really push them to, and every year you're trying to reach areas which you haven't reached before. And now the fellows network also really helps, because we have 88 fellows now. So they also recommend people beyond that. So that's the first stage. And once the application comes in, then there are these phone interviews, and we have a set of jury members who kind of call them and select. And then about almost half of them, about 60, 70 of them come to Green Hub for a face-to-face interview. And that's when we actually get to know the fellows more, you know, when you meet them, and that's how the 20 are selected. And we go wrong also. It's not that we are, you know, sometimes we do make a mistake, but overall, it's been a very interesting process. And
tell us some, tell us some of the interesting students who have passed through Green Hub, the background, from their background and the work that they have accomplished.
So it's been quite diverse actually. We have quite a few fellows now who are working directly with the community. So which is actually what our goal is, that it's not that we are trying to create filmmakers, all of them into filmmakers. What we're trying to do is connect them back to conservation, connect them back to their community. So some of them, like there's Surly Bon, she's from Karbi Anglong, West Karbi Anglong. And when she walked into Green Hub, her thing was that I'm joining because, you know, yes, I want to learn the camera and everything, but I want to tell the story of this God mountain. We're like, what is a God mountain? And there's this little hill across her house where, you know, as a child, she's gone there for picnics and really enjoyed it. But over time, quarrying has happened. And she can see that despite it being called a God mountain, it was being from the community itself, you know, quarrying was happening. And she was like, how do I really, you know, save this? It was a simple thought like that. But she continued that, you know, one could see the commitment somewhere. And over time, now she's grown into somebody who's formed a youth collective called Youth for Nature, Dongamukam, which is her area, and is gradually talking more and more about conservation, involving the community in conservation. It's a pilot site for an ecotourism project also. Similarly, there are quite a few. There's Mordecai, who's from Tamenglong in Manipur. And again, he sings very well also. But, and he studied and he went and studied in Bangalore, in fact, but wanted to come back and work in his area in Tamenglong. So he's been now working with Corbett Foundation for the last, since he graduated, 3 years. And he works very closely with the forest department, with the community. So it's a combination of awareness, using technology for camera trapping, all kinds of things. So yeah, so quite a few examples like that. And some who have done beautifully in films, like this Talo Anthony. He's from, originally from Zero, but he grew up in Rupa near Eagle Nest. And now he's worked on the Brink, the Discovery series. He's doing very well as a filmmaker in Arunachal. So it's quite a diverse group of fellows, yeah.
So now what's next? Now that...
I think actually Green Hub itself actually as a program is growing in directions where it needs a lot of work itself. Like while it started with this program, like our 1-year fellowship program itself is very intense. Like the fellows are with us for 1 year. It's not like, you know, they join, they get trained, they go into the field, come back and spend, a lot of time is spent with the technical stuff as well as in the field. So that is one part which is going on, but more and more our work is increasing with alumni, and every alumni is doing something different. So how do you make sure that there's a mentoring process for them to take that direction? While it is organic, there's a system to it also. So there's a lot of work with the alumni which is growing. So we have 2 forest project sites, which are like learning sites, which like, you know, where we are trying to attach the fellows to various forms of conservation, and which is led by them. So we are attaching researchers to them, enterprises to them, so that they get mentored to take forward the model ahead. So it's still at the initial stage, but that is one thing. And we may be starting Central Green Hub also, which will be based in Bhopal. And this is for the Hindi speaking state, Rajasthan, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. So that'll be based in, and that's again for rural tribal youth. So that's the new thing along with all this, which may be starting soon.
Oh, that's great to hear. I was about to ask you if greenhouse is going out of Northeast or not.
Yeah.
So,
This is going to be our first trial actually. Yeah.
okay, that's great. So, Rita Banerjee, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure having you on this show.
Okay.
Stay safe and good luck with your Central Green Up program.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Anand. Lovely talking to you.